Hi, my name is Christian Wamba and I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm super excited to show you how to deploy your Azure functions to Azure to the cloud using Visual Studio Code. If you've been following this series, there is a high chance that you have the repository that John has been working with, or rather the project that John has set up with you in the previous videos. But if you don't, just head to GitHub and clone this repository, which I will paste a link in the description for you. Just first of all, fork the repository. I already did that. I will just click on the link, and then I'm going to copy the repository, head back to Visual Studio Code, click on this Git tab, this source control tab, which would show us these options to either open a folder or clone a repository. In this case, I want to clone a repository, so I'll just click on the clone repository button, paste the URL we've copied, and hit enter. Now, Visual Studio Code will ask you which folder would you like to clone this repository into. So I'm just going to do that in my dev folder, create a new folder called John Papa, and then select this repository as a location where VS Code should clone the new John Papa's repo into. Once you've done this, Visual Studio Code would ask you, do you want to clone this repository, or do you want to open this newly cloned repository into a new VS Code window or into this particular window we're working with? In this case, I'm just going to go with this particular window. And as you can see, we have John Papa's repository set up for us to deploy. But before we get ahead of ourselves and start trying to deploy, let's actually ensure that this is working locally first. To do so, we need to first of all install the dependencies. So run npm installed on this project directory and hit enter. Next, close the terminal and search for debug. Start debugging in the command palette. If you hit enter, this would start running our application. And after a few seconds, you should see that we have an endpoint to click on and test if our API is actually working. So if we click on this endpoint, we would get a list of all the products which you probably have seen in the previous videos while following along this series. Now this ensures that this repository is in good shape and it's working, so we can go ahead and start trying to deploy it to Azure. To deploy this function to Azure, head back to Visual Studio Code, close the terminal, stop the debugger, open the command palette with Command-Shift-P or F1 and search for Azure function deploy. Choose the deploy to function app and hit enter. You'll be asked if you want to create a new function in Azure. In this case, that's what we want. If we had existing functions listed in our Azure account, existing Azure function project already deployed in our Azure account, they'll be listed here as well. So in this case, I don't have any. So I just have only the option to create a new function app in Azure. So hit enter and pick a globally unique name for this function app. Globally unique basically means that you cannot choose another name that some other Azure client has chosen for an Azure function. So the best way to avoid this is to add numbers at the end of your Azure function name. So in this case, I'm just going to add a random number to it. Let's say 2343. Hit enter and then choose the runtime stack. In this case, we want it to be a Node 14 deployment. Once you do that, you'll be asked to choose the location for this deployment. You should choose something very close to you. In my case, I'm just going to choose a random location or just the first one, which is Central US. And then the deployment would start and you should see the notification pop up telling you that your deployment is in progress. Once the deployment is complete, click on the View Output button and you should see a link to the just deployed Azure function. If you click on that link, open it in your browser, you should see the same result we saw when we were testing localhost, testing on localhost, but this time we actually have a publicly available endpoint that you can share with your friends or anyone that you want to see your Azure Functions API.